Hello, this is Ted Argyle, just explaining my design exercise for the Permaculture design course with Geoff Lawton. So here we go. I'm just going to draw the outline of the property first. So the property is approximately 8,000 square metres, so it's about 1 hectare or 2 acres if you're using that language. And it's a very flat block, and it's basically a rectangle with a slight variation. So the shape of the block is about that. Fortunately, from west, which is on this side of the page, to east on this side of the page, obviously north is this way. We're in the southern hemisphere. So it has a nice northerly aspect. The width of the property faces north, which we see as an advantage. One disadvantage, it's only an aesthetic disadvantage, and a auditory one, is there's a railway line which actually adjoins the property through here. So the railway line goes through this part here, but we have a few design features which we think will restrict the impact of that on the occupancy of the land. So I'm going to structure it so that we talk about water first, access, structures, earthworks, planting, and then we'll go into a few details. So if we look at water first, it is a very flat block, but as through the course Geoff's talked about how no block is perfectly flat, and I haven't actually gone out there with any equipment as yet, but I've had a good look at the block, and it seems to me that there is some room for some swales and some dams. Given that the land is not perfectly flat, it does slope in different parts. So from what I can gather, just from visual look, again I haven't used any equipment just yet, but from my eye I can see that the lowest point of the property is here. And if you have a look at the contour lines on the a map on the PDF document, you'll notice that there's a contour line here which indicates a drop in the landscape. There's also one to here, to the far left. There's a drop in the landscape, and here as well. But it doesn't really indicate exactly what the land looks like. I don't know who drew up the contour lines, but they're not entirely accurate from what I've seen. Basically, from what I see, if you divide the property in two, it's more or less a flat upside down bowl this way and a flat bowl that way on this side. So given that shape, we've got room for scope for swales and dams and that kind of thing. So from what I can gather, I think the swales will sit perfectly here. There seems to be a nice drop in landscape there where we could set up swales with a food forest system on that. And we also have some swale opportunities here at the left of the property on this type of angle. And there's also a dam opportunity, a small dam I think we can probably squeeze in here. That wouldn't be very big, but any sort of water catchment is good. And we'll have a large dam here. And these will be contour dams because the land is kind of sloping in that direction, it's kind of sloping a little bit in this direction. We can pick up that water at the bottom of the system. And in looking at the landscape, I'm very interested in gravity-fed irrigation systems for Zone 1 and Zone 2. So I have this idea, I don't know how good it is, but we'll shoot it to you anyway. So I was thinking, I really like the earth bank concept, which would sit behind the house. I'll draw the house in a bit more detail in a few minutes, but the earth bank will basically sit behind the house, that kind of kidney shape. And I thought that maybe it would work to have our water tanks sitting on top of the earth bank, or some water tanks sitting on top bank, not all of them of course. And then we could set up a windmill, and I'll just draw in a windmill. Excuse my artistic brilliance, it's not great. So if you can imagine a windmill just near this large contour dam here, and it would hopefully be able to take water to these tanks, and then we can gravity feed that water back down into zone 1 and possibly a little bit into zone 2, depending on how much water catchment we can get on that earth berm. And then also looking at having water tanks directly behind the house as well. If this system is not appropriate, or if it's not big enough to actually draw water into the house, then we could, or if for whatever reason we decide not to go for this option, then water tanks will sit behind the house anyway. Maybe we can use a pump system to irrigate. Moving now on to the structure. So access is next. So because of the way the contract is drawn up, we're only allowed to have access at the top left of the property. This is the only part of the property we're allowed to access the block. So I've basically designed the driveway to come in on this angle here. And the reason I've chosen that position is that sits, again, if you can imagine this land's basically like a very flat upside down bowl. This is the top of the landscape. So if we have that, we have the opportunity to capture a little bit of rainwater either side of the driveway. Given that's basically the top of the landscape that will draw water either side when it rains. It won't be a hard surface, it'll just be a gravel driveway, but there'll still be some potential runoff which we can utilise. We then look at structures next. So we've only got a couple of basic structures. We have a very simple home, which will sit roughly here. Again, capitalising on the northerly aspect, so that our sun comes in from this direction. Obviously, that should be yellow, but we're going to have a purple sun just for fun. So for passive solar design, we've placed the house in this position, directly in front of the earth berm. The earth berm is designed to help climate control the house a little bit and provide like a bit of a microclimate. It also has the double benefit of giving us some visual and some auditory privacy from the raven line, which is in service about 3 to 4 times per day. In the ideal world, our house will be built out of straw bale, but it will depend on what the local council permits us to build. But either way, whatever structure or whatever materials we choose, we're going to have a greenhouse at the front of the building to maximise that passive solar heating and the opportunity, of course, to propagate plants for Zone 1 and Zone 2 in that space as well. If we move now on to earthworks, so the major earthworks, of course, will be the dam on the bottom part of the property and the dam over on this part of the property as well. And they're just going to be very simple contour dams, nothing too elaborate because the landscape is very, very flat. The swales, as I mentioned before, will obviously need to be earthworked. So you can imagine a swale mound here, swale mound here, swale mound here. And again, depending on the exact contour of the landscape here, once it's surveyed, then I can give you a more exact idea. But the landscape, from what I can go from a visual look, looks something like this. So we could set up a couple of swales here and here as well. So again, earthworks will consist of initially taking probably the soil and the clay that comes from this area here and using that to create the mound or the earth berm behind the house to place the water tanks on and to provide wind sheltering and privacy from the railway line. So it has 2 or 3 purposes there. The swales will obviously be just dug out on contour, and we'll have a small dam to the left. Can now move on to, I forgot one structure. 2 other structures in fact. So we have a workshop, which is here. As best we can, we're trying to use as many recycled and reclaimed materials as possible for the structures on the property. The workshop, I think, I'm not much of a handyman, so the demands or the amount of tools we need won't be a great deal. And given the size of the property, we don't need much machinery as such. Most of it will be hand tools. So we figure that a shipping container, a reclaimed shipping container, clad in recycled timber, would be a good option, a good way of reusing something that's a waste product that we can use on the property. Other two structures which are worth mentioning are shelters for ducks and for chickens. We're placing them at the top of Zone 1 planting. I'm just looking for a different colour. Here we go. Zone 1, I'm planning on having basically a fenced off area so that the chickens and the ducks can't get in and eat all our food. So I'll sit to the top of the planting. I'll just draw these in so you can see what's happening. So basically, this is minor earthworks. This could probably be done by hand, but I really like the double reach bed concept, which Geoff Lawton talks about in the course and on his DVDs. And these, of course, these contours would be, these compost mounds would be on contour to maximise passive watering and drip irrigation and so on. So this will be an intensive vegetable garden. So if you imagine herbage all the way through here, I've placed a list of all the plants that we'll be eating, or that we do eat initially, and we're going to be favouring, once the system is established, perennial vegetable crops as opposed to annuals. So imagine an intense vegetable garden here. We have the chooks and the ducks at the top of the system there. Now that needs to be fenced off, of course, so that they can't come in and eat everything, but they will have access to Zone 2, which is every other part of the property. So we can take vegetable matter, weeds, waste vegetation, stuff that's gone to seed that we can't utilise, and we can feed that to the chooks or to the ducks here, and they have the trickle-down nutrient this way into the vegetable garden, and we can obviously have a deep litter system here where we can take that compost and run it through that system as well. So we're adjoining the chook and the duck system adjacent to the vegetable garden to maximise the benefits of both. We also have plans for things like worm farms and compost production and so on, just outside of that vegetable area as well. As Geoff talks about in the video, composting systems and poultry systems should be at the edge of Zone 1 to Zone 2. And of course we can free range our ducks and chooks out into Zone 2 because this area will be fenced off, so they won't get access to that. They can go anywhere else on the property and help control pests and provide manure and that kind of stuff, those kind of benefits to the system. So on these swales, obviously this would be a food forest. So we plan on having food forests which are reasonably close to the house here, and we also plan on having a food forest around the vegetable garden, but the food forest here will be mainly deciduous to encourage in the winter that winter sunlight to come in through to the vegetable garden into the house. So these will all be deciduous plantings here. This will be a mixture of evergreens and deciduous, depending on what specific types we end up choosing. But we want to maximise that passive solar gain to the house and to the vegetable garden by ensuring this is deciduous, so that in winter we allow the sunlight through, and in summer we get the shade benefit from those deciduous fruit trees as well. I think behind the chooks and the ducks, this area here, these would all be evergreen trees. So I hope I pronounce this right, but Tagasassi, I think it's called, which is a nitrogen fixing tree which is evergreen. This will provide obviously mulch production, stick fuel potentially. It also provides a permanent wind shelter to the vegetable garden and protection for the ducks and chooks as well. Because we're close to the Southern Ocean, we have a pretty cold southerly wind that comes in winter. So we want to try and protect our vegetable garden from that southern wind, and obviously the house, which is why we have the earth berm here. If this earth berm was unsuccessful or undoable, we would possibly look at putting 1 or 2 water tanks on stilts and then planting evergreens behind there to shield the house from that winter cold wind. So it'll look something like that. We're also looking at a woodlot as well. So we think that to the right of the property, basically the front of the house, would be all of our food production, so our food forest, which will major in fruit trees. Lower canopy, we're thinking maybe gooseberries, that kind of thing. And on this side here, as you're coming in with like a woodlot, we haven't settled on species yet. We're trying to go for species that are non-allelopathic and would provide an abundance of stick fuel and stuff that can be coppiced as well. So this would be our woodlot. We'll put that as red to simulate fire. And these would be on swales as well. To maximise the passive watering potential of swales and the runoff coming off either side of the driveway. This is my first design, so I apologise if I made some mistakes, but I'm sure that's all part of the process. Again, we're not going for zone 3, 4 or 5 because of the size of the property. Zone 1 and 2 are the most appropriate for this site, but I am excited about designing some other properties with those zones included. And I'd like to thank Geoff Lawton very much for providing us with the opportunity to do this course online. It's opened up a whole world of opportunities to people like myself who have busy lifestyles, and it's hard to attend courses and take time off work, so I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your feedback. So if anyone has any feedback on this design, and if they've got any ideas for me, I'd really appreciate that. That will help me as a designer, and that's only a good thing. So thanks very much.